Hello there, this is Jay Frost, and welcome to How to Raise, our weekly CFRE accredited program in the Philanthropy Mastermind series, brought to you through the generous sponsorship of our friends at DonorSearch. We won't be talking much about DonorSearch today unless our guest chooses to mention them, but that's not for any real lack of appreciation. This is, in fact, as you may already know, the 10th season of the Philanthropy Masterminds programming, underwritten by the folks at DonorSearch. So we're really grateful for their sponsorship, but mainly for everything they do for the field. And you can learn more about them as well as see much of what we've done, at least for the past 2 years, if not longer, over at the DonorSearch website at donorsearch.net. Under the resources tab, you'll see links to our 3 programs, including How to Raise, our CFRE accredited series. And you can even find a lot of this content at the DonorSearch YouTube channel. So we'll make sure there are links to all that in the chat if you're here with us live today. And if you're not, if you're watching this in a recording, thanks for being there. And hopefully you'll subscribe to that channel as well. Of course, today's episode is on Beyond Survival Mode, 5 strategies for fundraisers in today's uncertain times with the wonderful Sharon Papo. And I'm going to introduce her to you in a moment. But before I do, I want to welcome all of you. And I can start by just encouraging you to do what maybe somebody's already doing. I'm not sure. I haven't checked yet, but I'm going to do that now. And that's to take a look in the chat and just say, if you could say hello, or maybe which part of the world or the country that you're from, which organization that you're with, maybe what you do, any of that would be incredibly helpful to our guest today, our presenter, for context as she shares what she has to share with you, but also so that you can get to know one another. One of the benefits of being here live, of course, is that you get to talk with each other. And I want to encourage you to use the chat for just that. We also have Q&A where you can ask questions. And if you do have questions, please try to put them in the Q&A so we don't miss them. But the chat is perfect for everything else. And I want to thank everybody here from Helen, who's up there, and our fine friends in Canada, to Daniel and Abington, PA. And it's going by fast now, so I'm going to miss them. But Michael from the wilds of Western Mass. I want to know where those wilds are, but I have a feeling I may have driven through there recently. Michelle in Toledo, place I've been for many times. 103? That seems really hot for Toledo. You're not talking about Toledo, Spain. You're talking about Toledo, Ohio. And we've got lots of wonderful people here. Heidi, Jim, Brenda, Caitlin, Rachel, Stacy. I can't read all the names, but I'm so glad you're doing this. It's such a great gift, not only to each other, but especially to Sharon as she shares with you today. So thank you for that. And please keep using that space. Again, use the Q&A for the questions, if you will. I do want to answer a question that inevitably comes up, and that's, can I get a copy of the recording and the slides? And the answer to both is yes. So if you're here with us live, you will be receiving an email that comes to you in the next 48 hours, and that will include a link to the recording and to the slides. If you're watching this as a recording, you can always reach out to me. My name, again, is Jay Frost, and you can always reach out to me either through LinkedIn, through a direct message, or you can do so at my DonorSearch email address, which is j@donorsearch.net. We also have one more thing I'd like to alert you to, which is the survey that comes at the end. So whether you have to leave in 55 minutes after the hour or right after everything's concluded, whenever that is, make sure you fill that out. That is our best guide to knowing what you want to see and hear in the weeks ahead. It's going to be especially valuable to me as I jump on a plane right after today's session and head for our special annual sessions in England and perhaps one in Spain. More on that later. Right now, I want to introduce to you the wonderful Sharon Papo. She's a respected nonprofit leader, executive coach, expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the CEO of Indigo Skies Consulting, as well as co-CEO of LGBTQ e-learning, where she works with nonprofits, corporations, government organizations to build inclusive workplaces and strengthen leadership and fundraising capacity, the focus of our talk today. She holds a master's in social welfare from UC Berkeley, a BA in feminist studies from UC Santa Cruz, and a diversity inclusion certificate from Cornell. So she's been around the block academically, but her leadership in this field has earned her formal recognition from the city of Santa Cruz, which in fact declared a day in her honor. So lots of wonderful things about Sharon, including, and I think she'll have a link to this later, a book I have on my shelf and I encourage you to get as well, which is Success Redefined, a book she did with, among others, the great Jack Canfield. If you don't know that name, check out the book. He's a rather famous guy. Sharon, thank you so much for coming and sharing today. It's great to see you.
Hi, Jay. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just really, really delighted to be here and have this conversation together. This is a topic that feels so important, and we really want organizations to be not just surviving, but thriving. And so, yeah, I have a lot to share and excited to jump in. But first, I just want to say thank you for having me and congratulations on such a milestone of holding such really important conversations for so many years that are just so important to the sector.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, let's jump in. And as I'm pulling up my slides, I just noticed there were a few local folks. I saw Michelle Bassey and Vicky Reeder and some folks from my neck of the woods. So just love being here with local folks and people across the nation internationally. So glad you're here. All right, beyond survival mode. So I won't do another introduction. Jay, you did such a lovely one. Thank you. But I will again say that at the end of the presentation, if you like what you heard and you'd like to join my email list to find out more about what we're doing at Indigo Skies Consulting, you have a chance to sign up and a chance to win the book Success Redefined. And Jack Canfield, by the way, you may have heard of him because he's the chicken soup for the soul guy. So I know you're all doing so many things. So I just want to invite you to take a moment to take a breath and just show up because I'm going to be giving you a lot in this hour that I'm really excited to share with you and invite your presence. So the 5 strategies I'm going to be going into, one is having a clear strategy. 2 is setting up every week for success. 3 is how to activate your board. 4 is how you're working with and talking to your donors right now. And 5 is taking care of yourself. So 1, have a clear strategy. So I invite you to think, are your strategies working? And I think that so many people are in survival mode because you're in a state of overwhelm. And so I started with this one because one of the best ways to get out of overwhelm is to have a clear plan and work the plan. And I like this Albert Einstein quote, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So if you feel like what you're doing is not working and leading you to burnout, then I hope some of these tools will feel really helpful. And I want to give credit to Demir and Carrie Bentley. The next few things I'm going to share are from them. I want to give them credit. I love their work, life hack method, and it moved me from overwhelm to getting a lot done. So first of all, you have to know where you're going in order to get there. So I would say, it's July, so you have different fiscal years, but some of you just finished your year in June. And so it's a great time to think, what do you most want to accomplish this year? What steps do you need to take this quarter? What steps do you need to take this month, this week, today? And so being really thoughtful and intentional about what you're doing. And I find this really can support getting done the most important thing. So here's an example of a slide of, all right, you're doing a $5 million capital campaign, right? Just breaking it down. What do you need to do this by 12 months, 9 months, 6 months, and really thinking and taking that time to plan. And making sure you're writing down your biggest goals this year. If you're watching this on replay, you may want to pause. And if you haven't done this, I would really encourage you to get really clear because there are going to be so many people and so many things asking for your attention, and you're not going to get all of them done. So being really clear, what's most important? What does success really look like? And taking a moment to learn a lesson each week, really reviewing all that you've accomplished. What went well? What should I double down on next week? And I just want to acknowledge that our negativity bias makes it easy to focus on what we didn't get done. But even in a bad week, you probably got a lot of good work done. So, two, setting up every week for success. So I find the best way to do this is to pre-plan your week. You really want to be in the offense, not just the defense. Abe Lincoln said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first four sharpening the axe." And so, really, being really intentional with your time. And I find that that makes a huge difference. And getting really clear, there's this book called The One Big Thing, and that I found was really helpful. So you can get really clear on what is the one big priority you have for the week. And most of us, we vastly overestimate what we can get done in a day, but we often underestimate what we can get done in a year or 2 years or 3 years. But for a week, getting really clear what's most important. So when all the other things come and people ask me to do 20 other things, you can say, what's most important and what do I need to move forward to get toward my big annual goal? And what will make everything else easier or not important? And also, what can I do to save time later? Think about leverage tasks. And I think that it's so easy to focus on what's in front of you, but that's not necessarily the most important thing. So here's an example of a leverage task. Okay, a bike delivery person received 10 grocery delivery orders at the same time. What can she do? So I can't see the chat right now, but I would love to know. Please answer in the chat. And Jay, can you read them off?
Sure.
Or if people aren't, then Jay, can you give a response? What are some things that someone could do if you have to do something that is really hard? What could this bike delivery person do?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I wanted to okay, now we're starting to get reactions in the audience because I don't want to take up too much oxygen here. So we have Michelle talking about sort by location to determine how many she can actually accomplish.
Great idea. What else?
Okay, folks, join Michelle.
Well, I'll tell you that people often think, how can I get all this done? But
Mhm.
sometimes we have to really leverage. And we could do it by getting a cart. And so then you don't have to, you could think, yeah, I'm going to take all these different rides. I'm going to map out my thing. But what if are there things you can do to make the whole job easier?
You did
And
open up the floodgates, though, I should let you know. Now we have setting up a delivery route and sorting by the order that's the most dollars and have others help and figure out which order is the most complicated. I just want to make sure I share this with you.
great. Thanks for that feedback. I really welcome it. And so I want to say those are all great ideas, but I want to say that yes, you could delegate. There are lots of different ways to do things, but thinking about our leverage priorities, what's something that can make everything else easier? And I'll just do a little plug because I know so many organizations are so hesitant to be using so many of the new AI tools, but these are often this can be such a leverage tool to learn how to do it to save you 1, 5, 10% of your time every week. So thinking about what are the things you can do to make everything else easier. And if you probably have some of these things, but let's say you have volunteers always asking you for questions. So you're making a toolkit that might save you hours answering these questions. Setting up automated thank you emails to be sent out to online donors if you don't have that already. Using task management software like Asana so you can keep track of all of your promises and tasks and share them with your teams. Training your board so that they can be a stronger part of your team. There's so many things that we can be doing that can leverage our time. So I would really encourage you to reflect on this week and to choose your leverage priority. All right, interrogate your calendar. So I want to share that we have 168 hours a week. And time is a non renewable resource. So you cannot get more of it, whether you are the richest person in the world, you don't have any more hours in the day. It's a non renewable resource. And so we really want to defend it fiercely and allocate it with care. And I think what is really important to understand about your time is somebody is always going to be disappointed with how you spend your time. There's a beautiful book by Mel Robbins called Let Them. I'm guessing some folks here may have read that. And it's so powerful because it's just, I know a lot of people in the fundraising world were people pleasers. And so sometimes this can be hard. But when you are at peace that you're always going to disappoint someone, then you can get back to what is most important. What is most important at the end of the day to our work, to raising the funds, to meeting our mission. And it's probably not answering every email within an hour. And so when you're clear what you want to do and what's most important, and then you really want to optimize your calendar. You want it can be consolidating all your meetings on certain days to maximize for focused work blocks. Checking emails just a couple times a day so it's not this constant distractor. Making sure you're scheduling time to do what's most important. I remember chatting with a development director who was just not getting to those big important calls she had to make. Right? It was. She wasn't making time. And so we said, all right, let's schedule it. Let's block it out. Let's have, a commitment to that task so that you can make sure you do what is most important. And you can also do this in your personal life. It's on your meal prep, doing one big shop in the weekend instead of a little bit each night, and preparing your meals. So you can schedule your life, not just your work life. So you may want to interrogate and optimize your calendar, reviewing the next 14 days. Look for landmines. What's going to be in the way? How much time do you really have for moving your task forward? And are you overcommitting with time you don't have? And I find, again, that a lot of people do this, that really we can only do about 10 things a day. And if you finish those 10 things, you can always add more, but it's hard when you start out with 50 things a day. You're just setting yourself up for failure. And really triage your task list, really assigning degrees of urgency to every task. What's going to get done? What's going to get pushed off? And again, what's the one big thing that's most important that will create the most value and make your life easier over time? Of course, balancing urgency with impact. And thinking how you can do the most good with your limited supply of time and energy. So again, the nature of human beings is we want to do more than we have time for. And so part of leadership is making these decisions about what gets done, what doesn't, to maximize the greatest good. And that is easier said than done, but it's really important. And I love this David Allen quote: "You can do anything, but not everything." All right. So after you've made tough choices about what's going to happen, with your eyes open to the consequences, right? You're calendaring your tasks. And a great strategy is to allow 20% of your time to, they call it UUW, unwanted, unplanned for work, so that you have time to respond to all the things that are going to come in through email across your plate that you don't know of, and always planning 2 weeks ahead of time. All right. And a few more tips. Thinking about removing resistance to your planning. So I just want to say planning can be anxiety provoking. It can be hard to look at all the promises you've made, all the things you have to do. Are there unrealistic expectations of you and your time? But to look at it, then you can say what's most important. And then you can move your promises in alignment with reality and what you actually can do. And I think that can save so much, that if your supervisor, your board is expecting something and you're like, I'm just not going to get it because this most important thing, this grant is due and I have to do that, then just saying, I'm going to get this to you next week and this is why, and aligning your promises with reality. And also, I think sometimes people don't want to plan because things will come up and it will change. So you make a solid plan and then you release expectations that it's going to work out. And you're going to navigate to your final destination, but using the plan as a guide. That's the sailor's mentality. And I think that so many of us are distracting ourselves. So a great tool is to gamify your work blocks and reward yourself. Say, I'm going to do this thing that's really hard. Maybe I'm really nervous to call this big potential donor and ask for this meeting, and I keep putting it off because I have a lot of stuff around making that call. So reward yourself after you do the hard things, and make sure that when you're doing the things that are most important, make sure you have an undistracted work block so that you're not getting messages and notifications. Maybe you put in your phone somewhere else. And I think a lot of people say, well, I need to be available by email all the time because what if something comes and it's urgent? And people don't need an instant response from you. They just need to know when you will respond. And so I think a lot of people now put in their email responder, I check emails at 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. I'll get back to you then. And another thing is taking massive imperfect action. I know that perfectionism is in the way for a lot of folks moving forward on things because it's not perfect. And so I want to invite you to take massive imperfect action, and that will make a big difference. All right, so pre-planning review. Before Monday, review your past weeks. What did you learn? Decide on one priority for this week. Take an accurate inventory of your time supply. Review your task list. Make sure your time demand matches the supply, and reward yourself. Really important. Okay, so I want to move on to the third, which is activating your board. So I talk to a lot of executive directors and development directors, and they sometimes have frustrations with their boards. And sometimes I talk to board members, and I really, and sometimes I had a board member say to me last week, you know, the staff has asked me, they've said, just go out to coffee with these potential donors. And they said, I don't understand how to move from meeting someone at an event to getting somehow to going out to coffee. Like, and I realize that there's a lot of information that staff will assume that their board members know or know how to do that they don't necessarily know. So being really clear with your board, what do you need from them? What do they need to know or learn? What's in the way of them showing up in the way you're requesting? What's the impact of them not showing up in the way you're requesting? And so I think that it's really important for organizations to have this conversation that I sometimes talk to staff, and they're saying, we've asked our board and they're not moving. But I think having the really honest conversation of, well, with the board, we just lost X amount of dollars from federal funding, and this is where we are, and this is what's going to happen if we can't raise this money, and this is the strategy, and the strategy is all hands on deck, and I'm really counting on you to help me and open these doors, and have a brainstorm with your board. If we can't raise this money, what's going to happen? And making sure that people really understand that. Boards need training to be effective ambassadors. So, and again, really giving people the tools. I actually did a board training yesterday and really walked people through, what do you do when you meet someone, right? And so here's some suggestions. For a board member, introduce yourself. Making sure if they have a board name tag, they're wearing it. They're going to events. They're out there. They're being a great ambassador, and they're engaging with people around the work that you're doing. Are you actually give them the questions that they should be asking people to start up the conversations. Things like, are you aware of the great work that this organization's doing? Are you aware of the issues that foster care youth are currently facing? Have you been following what's going on with the federal cuts to organizations these days? Whatever the questions are that engages people in conversation. And as much as possible, it's really great to train your board to share their why. And it's a great board exercise to have people get into pairs and say, what you could be on any board and you're here. There's a reason that you care about this work. Why is it? And having people share, and doing that, you could have someone different share at every board meeting if you want. But I think having your board members not just talk about governance and fundraising and all the important things they talk about, but to keep getting in touch with why they showed up, what they're passionate about. it will move them to action when they get in touch with that. It moves all of us to action when we remember our why. And also, I find that some board members have a hard time being ambassadors because they feel uncomfortable uh, with the organization's elevator pitch. So it's really great to write it out for them, to, say, you'll say it in your own words, but actually write it out, have them practice in board meetings, really make sure there's training and that they can hear how other people say it, because we remember 10% of what we hear, 20% of what we do, and 40%, I'm sorry, 10% of what we hear, 20% of what we do, and 40% of what we teach. And so if you can have people do it and then, teach another board, then that goes really far. Um, and also, um, making sure that they practice how to follow up with, they meet someone, they're having a great conversation, and then let them practice that conversation where they say, I really enjoyed talking to you. Would you like to learn more about the issues and of whatever your issues are and the work and the impact of our organization? And if they say yes, you want to make sure they get their contact information and follow up. And that there's a clear plan. So they follow up, they talk to someone, and maybe they didn't get their contact information, but maybe they're going to say to you, this is who I chatted with, and this is what I learned and discussed, and we really want to continue this conversation. And then having a follow-up plan based on the conversation. What is the next step to bring that person into your organizational family? And then also helping them, give them some draft text about if they're calling, emailing, or texting them to follow up. What are they going to say? How can they engage? And so again, I think one of the great ways to activate boards is to help them get in touch with their why, and then make sure they have the tools and clarity about what they can do to activate and move forward, to be your partners on the fundraising team. And letting them know that you're not asking them to do anything that they hate doing. At a board training I did recently, a board member said, I hate phone calls. I will not do them. And I said, then that is not a good role for you. But she's like, I would be happy to write cards. And I said, fantastic. You should write cards. And so I think it's about finding the right task for the right person, and also letting people realize, of course, that 90% of fundraising is not asking anyone for money. It's being an ambassador. It's sharing the impact of your work. It's making people feel welcome. It's talking about your mission and making sure people understand what you're doing and how important it is. And so again, it's finding the right role and the right task for each board member, so that they can show up in the way that makes them not want to leave your board, but gets them involved in the way that really helps you and is something they're willing to do. And I think it's really important to make sure they're communicating for today. So why is your work urgent, clear, and compelling today? Because there's always a lot of fundraising, but right now, with everything going on in our world, people are there's a lot of requests for funding, and there's a lot of great work to be funded. And so it's really important that as you're sharing the elevator pitch, it's not just we do this good thing, but this is why it's important today. So people really understand that there is a sense of urgency, and that is so important to training your staff and your board to be effective ambassadors. All right, next we're going to talk about talking to your donors. So the economy was shakier a few months ago. We've had a great week. I don't have a crystal ball for what's coming next, but what I do want to say around hard economic times is donors have historically risen to the occasion during hard times. However, donors usually, if they have to make tough choices because they may have less resources to give, they often say, okay, these are the organizations I care about most, and I'm going to make sure they get through this hard time. And sometimes they're not as willing to fund the organizations that are not closest to their to their world, closest to their heart. And so it's really important that with your donors that you're trying to keep them close. And a great way to do that is, of course, inviting them to volunteer, get on a board or committee, making sure you're in communication, inviting them to events so that you do stay top of mind when if they're economically hard times. And it's really important to talk to your donors. Sometimes I talk to development staff and things are harder. They just lost funding and they freeze and they're like, what are we going to do? And what I know is that donors, when people don't hear from you, they make up stories and it's probably not the story you want them to make up. So I think it's great to just keep in touch with your donors. How are they doing? What are they concerned about? What are they hopeful about? What should you be aware of right now? Really, really honoring them as thinking partners, bringing them again into the organizational family. And it's not just always talking about the work, but making sure that you're checking in on them as well. And my background is as a licensed clinical social worker. And what I know as a therapist is that some people go to therapy because they have big things they want to work on, but other people go because it is so rare to have someone to be fully present with you. And that presence and attention is a gift. And so when you're talking to someone, making sure you're not distracted, making sure that you're communicating not only with your words, but your voice and your body language, that you're totally present. And that is again, it's really a gift, and it's rare today in our culture of distraction. So anytime you have the opportunity to show up for someone in that way, it's really meaningful. And as much as possible, you want to share these tools, I said, with your board, but also share the relationships, because the turnover rate of development professionals is real, and board members cycle off. And I have seen far too many times organizations that when somebody leaves, the relationship leaves with them. And it's really can be devastating for organizations. So there was someone once said to me, don't have your relationships be skinny. You want to make sure that multiple people always are holding relationships with donors, so that if a board member cycles off who was their main contact or a staff person, that they always have someone they feel connected to. And again, as I said this already, don't go silent in hard times. And it's really important that, especially if you've lost some funding and maybe you're making hard decisions, people, it's really going to be, you want to be thoughtful about how you're communicating. And so people often don't want to fund what they see as a sinking ship. So you might say, you know what, we lost a significant amount of funding. We're making tough choices, and we are deciding not to do these few programs, but we are doing these other programs, and we're keeping them strong, and they're vibrant, and they need your support. And this is the most important thing we see that we need to do right now. And so being really clear again in your messaging, communicating in the way your donors want to be communicated with. Ideally, you've done a donor survey, so do they want email? How do they get their information? I find, I really enjoy the videos and phone calls, but ideally you're communicating with them in the way that they want to be communicated with, and always sharing the impact they've helped to make, and making sure that they know that you are still a good investment even when times are tough. All right, this is the last section, and it's on taking care of yourself. So again, my background is as a licensed clinical social worker, and I have to tell myself that I was an executive director for 12 years, and I did not always follow this advice. And I burnt out, and I left jobs, and I did some great work that at times I prioritized that moment and that goal over ensuring that I could sustain for the longer term. And that had a cost. And so I think there can always feel like a crisis, but burnout is a real risk. And when we are in the work of having relationships, that every time someone leaves that's holding these authentic relationships, it makes it really hard for the organization. So I really advise you to get in touch with what's your why. I said that for the board, but I think for every staff person, it's so important. What's your why? Why do you do this work? Why did you choose this organization? And to really get clear, write it down, put it on your bulletin board, and be really thoughtful to ask yourself, what's going to sustain you in this work when it gets hard? And what makes you love your job? And I know that when things get busy and there are deadlines and there's stress and someone snapped at you and something feels hard, sometimes we can forget these things. And so I think it's really, really important to keep getting in touch with this. And maybe it's something you read every day. And also to be really clear, what drains your energy? What makes you want to quit? And there are different ways to prioritize what's most important. And one way is by your energy. Because if you're doing things all the time that is draining all your energy and you don't want to do them, that's setting you up for a job you don't want to have. There are so many things and so many ways to do this work that I think that it's really important to be aware of. Just notice, when I did this, I loved it and it made me feel great. When I did this, I hated it. There's so many different ways to raise money, and some people are like, if you enjoy sitting down with people one-on-one, but you don't like crowds and you don't want to do events, great, don't do events. So make sure that you find the way that works for you. And boundaries is such a big and important part of this work. And I think, again, where many people in the sector are people pleasers, boundaries can be hard. But knowing, again, that you're always going to disappoint someone, and really you have to say 100 no's in order to say one big yes to what's most important. And I think it's actually really great to practice. I think bringing this idea into your workplace and having the conversation, and even, there are lots of ways you can say no. You don't just have to say, no, I won't do that. You can say, you asked me to do this. I'd be happy to do that, but that means that I won't get this other most important thing. Can we actually talk about what is the most important thing? Because I see that it's this. And do you see something else? Or it can be, I would be happy to do that, but I need more information. Or I'd be happy to do that, but not this week. Or I really don't have time. Or this is actually not in this seems like a really lovely idea, but it's not in our priority list. And so either we need to change that list, or we need to say no. So I think that there's just a lot of different ways to have these boundaries, to say yes to what's most important. And again, this takes practice. And so I invite you to practice. And also think about, what do you make possible when you say no?
Can you still hear me? So thinking about when you say no, um, you you make possible what's most important, and that is a really big thing. You also can keep your self-respect. You can you can go home at a reasonable time. You can not burn out. You can stay in your job and love your job, right? So there's you can keep your relationships with integrity. So saying no has a lot of benefits. And I just want to acknowledge that it takes courage to say no. It can be really hard to make a tough decision that will disappoint someone today, but serve the greater good in the long run. And but to do the most good, you just have to really acknowledge that your resources are limited, and making those tough trade-offs with your eyes wide open. Yes, when I do this and not this, I'm going to upset this person. So I need to have a conversation with that person, or I need to let them know why I'm making this choice. And I also find that it's so easy to be hard on ourselves. And again, because our brains are mostly wired to underestimate how long it will take us to get tasks done. And because things come on our plate and we get 100 emails a day, that oftentimes at the end of the day, I don't know about you, but I used to look at my task list and I used to say, ugh, look at all the things I didn't get to, because I had 40 things on my task list, right? I had set myself up for failure. And so I decided, and then I would feel defeated and I'd lose my energy. And so I decided to change how I was ending my day. And I'd go home and I would take out a blank sheet of paper and I would write down all the things I got done. And then I would celebrate them. I would be like, look at what I got done. Look at what it moved forward and look how important it was. So really changing our mind frame, because we don't live in reality. We live in our perceptions and our stories around reality. And so at the end of the day, that can be a great exercise. So I have given you a lot, and I'm going to be wrapping up so we have some time for questions. But I want to say that, I hope you will take one thing from this workshop today. And it might be around boards, it might be around planning, it might be around boundaries, it might be around training ambassadors. But just know that a little change, a little shift can have a big impact. So if you are traveling to Europe and you make a 1-degree shift and you sustain that shift over a year's time, you could end up in Africa. So, right, a 1-degree shift can get you somewhere totally different. So I really want to encourage you to think, okay, what resonated with me today? What did I learn? What feels juicy and interesting? And how can I move that forward? So again, the recap is we talked about have a clear strategy, set up every week for success. And, we're not going to win every day, but we can win every week if we're really clear on the one big thing. And ideally, we block time in our schedule by Tuesday to do the one big thing so that we can have that, the most important win in our schedule early. Talked about activating your board. In uncertain times, I just feel like our boards some organizations have great activated boards, but so many organizations I talk to, there's so much room for growth in how their boards can show up to really support the organization as strong ambassadors and fundraisers. And so, are some of these tools things you want to move forward? And then talking to your donors, keeping them close, and then taking care of yourself. So as I said, thank you so much. I'm glad we're going to leave a little time for questions. And here is a QR code. If you would like a chance to win the book, Success Redefined by myself, Jack Canfield, and other authors, you can use this QR code. It can also, if you want, you can sign up for my email list, do lots of great webinars and trainings, and would love to stay connected if you would like. All right, and Jay, are there questions?
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you. And before you take that off the screen, if you'd put that back up, maybe Jack can put that information in the chat as well for anybody who might have missed it when it was on the screen, or it can click through to it afterwards. So people can have a chance to learn more about your work, but also win a copy of that book, which I think is really generous of you. Thank you. So Jack, if you can put that in the chat, that would be wonderful. And I also want to give folks a second to put any questions they might have, or any comments for that matter, in the Q&A. I did see something flow through the chat, which I may have missed because it was there. So please, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. And while people are doing that, I just want to let everybody know what's coming up next in the series, if I may. And that is that this Friday, we have the episode of the PM podcast drops with legendary fundraising strategist Kay Sprinkle Grace. It's a powerful conversation about her whole life, the whole arc of her life, and tracing her family roots back to when they originally arrived in California during the gold rush, and a book that she's written that no one's read yet. And it's all about family history. Really interesting conversation. That's wherever you like to listen, as well as, of course, on the DonorSearch YouTube channel. That's the PM podcast. And then on next Tuesday, in our News and Views show, Frontlines of Social Good, we have Clayton Weimers who is the executive director of Reporters Without Borders, discussing the global threats facing journalism around the world, but also here in the US. And in another segment, Alex Curley, founder of Adopt a Station and author of Semi-Public, will explore how public media can innovate and thrive in times of crisis. That's next Tuesday at a different time because I'll be in Europe. That'll be at 2 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. And then this show will also be at 2 p.m. Tuesday, or rather Thursday, 2 p.m. Thursday. That's How to Raise, and it'll be with Michelle Boggs. So if you're interested in GoFundMe, or for that matter, crowdfunding at all, she is the voice there at GoFundMe. So she'll show you how to meet donors, where they are, and unlock more support. So with that, I want to make sure that we can see you again, Sharon. Sorry about that false alarm. And see if we have any questions that are lining up here in either the chat or the Q&A. And I do know we have one here from Helen, who had asked, what are signs that a team is stuck in survival mode if they're hitting short-term goals? Oh, can't hear you, unfortunately. I think you're muted right now, Sharon.
Got it. Thank you. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. It's what are signs that a team is stuck in survival mode, even if they're hitting their short-term goals?
Well, I think that it's really important to have long-term goals so that you know that where you're going, that your short-term goals are getting you to where you ultimately want to go. And so when I think about survival mode, I think about I'm holding on for dear life, and I don't have any spaciousness. I don't have any downtime. I don't have any time to reflect. And it's really easy to do in so many of our organizations when we are understaffed and deeply committed to the work, and there's always more work to do. And so I think having conversations, really honest conversations on our team about what is it going to take to keep us in this work? And what does that look like for each of us individually? And what do we need? And what reminders do we need to give people? So, and also, how do we show up our best? So, for example, when I was an executive director, before I would go on these really big asks with donors, I would go to yoga class, or at least take a walk around the block, or at least take 3 deep breaths. You know, what did I need to do to show up to be my best? And I think that it's also about looking at what we're doing and thinking, what is the best use of my limited time and energy? So I'll give you an example for events. I go to a lot of events, especially with smaller organizations, and they have silent auctions and no live auction. And silent auctions earn about 40% of the average of the market rate of the gift, the item, and live auctions are 80%. So it would be with limited time, if you have volunteers doing it and they want to do it, great. But if you're staff doing it, just have a live auction. Just do a Fund the Future where you're just asking people to donate to the work, because people will probably give more and they won't be thinking about it. So I think that it's really important to also be really clear about are our goals the right goals? Where are they getting us to? And just because we've always done something doesn't mean we have to keep doing it.
It's really, really important. But I know that one of the problems here is something you mentioned at the outset of this, which is about people pleasing, which is something that I fall into that category. And now, among other things, you are an LCSW. So I know you've dealt with these issues, not just professionally in fundraising, but just in general. You understand the intrinsic motivations for people. How do you, I know you've given us a lot of things to think about in this session, but how do we address fundamentally this very kind of happy external trait, but sometimes confining internal trait of trying to please everybody? Because that seems to be at the heart of much of the things that we do that drive us bananas.
Yeah, absolutely. And two of the tools that I have found so helpful. One, again, is realizing that we are always going to disappoint someone. We are, and so who do we want to disappoint? Who are we going to have? Is it my spouse again because I'm late again and I missed dinner because I'm meeting? Is that okay? And so who are we willing to disappoint? And what's the consequence of that? And then I also think that I mentioned the book Mel Robbins' Let Them. I think that there's work on our mindset of realizing that when people are upset, sometimes it's okay. I mean, again, if your biggest donor is upset about something and you can not lose that. If there's a way that, I'm not saying you're just going to let everyone be mad and that's okay. You're always assessing, but people are going to be disappointed. And I think that making peace with that, and then I think being ahead of the game of saying, I said that I would get you this by Friday, but this new thing has come up, but I actually realize that's not what I need to be working on. So let's get a new plan together. I think that when we make promises, when we just go someone, people are mad. But when we let them know and we make a new promise, or we say, I think we need someone else to get this done, then I think we're working towards solutions, and it can make a big difference.
Very helpful for me today as I'm traveling and a lot of things are being juggled on my to-do list, which is another question I have. But first, I want to get to another question from Helen, which is, she asked, can you share an example of an organization that successfully transitioned out of survival mode? And what element from the 5 strategies made the most difference or impact in that transition?
I believe with the planning. And I know when I started with planning that I was afraid that people would say, what does this have to do with fundraising? But I really feel like when we are just every day responding, and not able to say, okay, what's most important? Is everybody on the same page? Okay, are we on the same page that we are putting this forward and not doing this forward? I think having that understanding and those conversations sometimes about, yes, this is a great idea this board member came up with, and if we say yes to that, let's really talk about what we're going to say no to, and having those really sometimes hard, honest conversations. Sometimes as people pleasers, that can be really hard because we just want to say yes. And it's not that it wasn't a great idea. It was a great idea. The problem is we just don't have more capacity to do all the great ideas. So being really thoughtful. All right, what's the impact of this idea? What's the impact on the staff? Or the board had this idea. Can they do it from A to Z? No, they can't. Okay, so what do they really need from staff? Or are they just having a great idea that they want us to do? And so, being really clear. But I think that clarity, and the clarity also for each development professional to understand what their goals are. And then when every new thing comes, saying, okay, is this helping me meet this goal? Because if it's not, then, and if doing this is taking me away from meeting this goal, then I need to go to my supervisor and say, this was a great idea, but I just want to be clear on what this impact can be. And I don't think this is a good idea, and let's talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because you talked about the to-do lists, and I love the idea of celebrating rather than self-flagellation, which is the tendency if we have 40 items, like you said on your list. But I've heard other people say, well, we should throw away the to-do lists and calendar everything. And that makes some logical sense to me, but I wonder if that still is just another way of moving from one format, in a sense, to another, rather than looking at the planning. So we're letting the overall goal guide our activity rather than just rearranging the activity so it's more manageable.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to have clarity on what we need to do. And then I think that if you have something that's really important to do, I think there is something really powerful about you. Like, all right, this is my one big thing this week. But if you don't have time in your calendar, you're going to be doing it in the evenings and weekends. So there's something really powerful about having work blocks, giving yourself that 20% of your time for whatever unwanted, unplanned for work, whatever is going to come up, so that you know that you have time to get done what's most important, and it's not going to fall to the back burner, or you're going to run out of time, or you're going to be working 60 hours a week.
Right. Or not overtaken by email or something like that, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, so this is kind of channeling a question that Helen had asked earlier in a different format, which is, if people were to take one thing away to start with after listening to this today and what you shared, both from an individual standpoint and an institutional one, what would that one thing be for the institution and for the person?
Well, I'm a social worker. So I really feel like the self-care is so important because the truth is that so much of philanthropy is based around relationships. And the turnover rate is very high in our sector. And so every time you're having this revolving door of professionals, that people are restarting relationships, and that has a big cost. It has a cost of not only the hiring and the time and the onboarding, but the relationship building. And so I think as a sector, we have to have some hard conversations about especially when we have great people, having the conversations of, you're so great at this. How do we keep you in this role? What do you need? And having those conversations. I think we live in a hard time with inflation where to do the same amount of work every year, we just keep needing to raise more money. And, when you work in the for-profit world, you sell more widgets, you make more money. But when you're in a community-based organization, you do great work, more people want your services. And so you may not have more funding, but you have more to do that costs more. So it's a challenging business model. But I really think as a sector, we are suffering from not having these conversations. And look, there are going to be times to push, of course, but we can't chronically be pushing.
Thank you so much for this, Sharon. Really appreciate it. I appreciate everybody being here as well, and asking good questions, but also just paying attention to not only the subject and to our presenter, but to your own lives and to the work of your organizations in a way that is sustainable and lets you recharge. And I know that you'll be doing that after sharing with us today. So thank you, Sharon. Thank you to all of you. Our thanks, of course, to DonorSearch for letting us have these conversations. You can get a copy of this if you're just watching this recording over on the YouTube channel very shortly. An email will come to all those who are here with us live. I want to also give my thanks to Jack Frost, who is manning the helm technically here as our producer. Thanks to all of you. Look forward to seeing you next time. Till then, take care.